Well, heavens, it has been a wonderful year. I've been a councillor for almost 25 years, or it'll be 25 years next month. And I've watched lots of different people act as mayor, well, in fact, almost 25 of them. And I've been a councillor and I've played lots of different roles in the council. But in honesty, it's like no other role in the council. And it is a particular honour. It is a very special thing to do. And it gives an in to... I thought I knew Barnet, and I do. I've been around a long time. I know lots of communities. I've known lots of groups. But actually, I'm still finding groups and communities that are new to me, or I didn't know as well. I either didn't know they existed, or I certainly hadn't met them and spent time with them. I've had great fun this year, for example, getting to know the Albanian community and the Nepalese community, who were two of perhaps the newer communities in Barnet. So. Yeah, that aspect has been really interesting. It's an interesting role in the sense that, and I've been quite a political animal during my time. I led the opposition Labour opposition for 10 years. So as mayor, I'm supposed to be non-political because I chair council. I'm supposed to be the even-handed in council, and it's about the dignity of the office. It's above the politics. So that was an unusual challenge for me, it's been a really interesting year in the sense that you get invitations from all sorts of different people. You get to do so many different things. I was at the Urban Games last summer and I was in robe and I had several young, silly 10 and 11-year-old boys who kept landing on their knees in front of me, so I quietly knighted them. So there are lovely moments like that. There are some very serious moments, and it has been a particularly both busy and momentous year. We've had two and are about to have a third major royal event, and the mayor plays a particular role during those events. We started with the Jubilee, the Platinum Jubilee last summer, and I'll come back to that because I think there's something very particular about what we celebrated there. And then, and then of course, the late Queen's death, the proclamation of the accession, which is one of the most tense moments as mayor, because you only have one shot at getting that somewhat Shakespearean English statement said well. So I hope I managed to carry that off. And then we had a civic service the night before the funeral. And of course, we're now working towards the coronation. So they're big events for our community. And they really have marked this year. And the Jubilee last summer in particular was a joyous occasion, partly because of the amazing celebration of 70 years of service. And as somebody who was at that point starting her journey as a civic mayor and giving her time as a civic mayor and a figurehead, actually there was a sense of looking to what the Queen had done over 70 years and recognising some of the dignity and the responsibility that you carried in a very small way as the civic mayor. So that was particularly special. It brought communities right the way across the borough together. I had a lot of cake and a lot of tea and a lot of celebration, and I planted quite a lot of trees as well. So that was just a wonderful moment at the beginning, but it also marked, I think, we were all at that point just being released from the rigours of the COVID pandemic and the strictures of being careful about COVID. So not only with the Jubilee, but actually also because we were being released, lots of groups were having their first AGM, their first big community picnic, their first school event since the beginning of COVID, so for some 3 years. And it had a really interesting feeling that early part of the summer, that it really was joyous and celebratory. One of my very first appointments was at a community picnic, but I was also chairing or representing the mayoralty at a whole range of different AGMs for small organisations. So it's been a really interesting year. It has, as we'll come to in a minute, it has lots of different events that you go to, and some are very grand and some are really cosy. But it's been about making sure that the mayoralty for me is real for people at a time when money's tight, and this is quite a grand office in local terms, making sure that people knew that it was there for them. And so it's been a very special year in that sense. Well, there are the big ceremonial ones. We've talked a little bit about the accession to the throne and some of those big things, the Jubilee, planting the, unveiling the commemorative stone in Golders Hill Park, and then managing to light the beacon that evening without lighting myself, given that I was in robe. So, you know, there are those events. There are the big ceremonial ones for London. So the London Local Government Dinner, hosted by the Lord Mayor of the city in the Mansion House, definitely ranks up there as one of those experiences you won't get very often. And the London Mayors Association have a civic service at Westminster Abbey every year. So you have all 32, 33 mayors processing in with their mace bearers in line into the Abbey, and you go across the forecourt of the Abbey, and it certainly makes people stop and look when there are all of you in your robes and with your maces. So there are big events like that, but there are very special things. There are very special things. I've honoured a couple of people on their 100th birthdays. Two lovely ladies in a care home in recent weeks who were just lovely. One was had been a ballet dancer. She was quite wonderful. A wonderful older gentleman in High Barnet who was featured in the Barnet Society magazine, and also is actually, I think the statement is there, the story is there in the Barnet Museum as well. He was 100. He had a really interesting wartime history, but he was also then involved with, as a police forensics, looking at the Yorkshire Ripper case. Really interesting life, and he was very articulate. We talked for a lot longer than we were planning to, and had to watch our next appointment because he was just full of chat and full of stories. So it spans that, but there have been wonderful occasions with young people, and that's been one of the things I was very keen to do, is include young people as much as possible during the year. And so it's been a standout moment for having some of those Jack Petchey Awards, where young people who didn't originally believe in themselves had done wonderful things and were being awarded a prize for that. Lots of children, lots of schools, a lot of school councils, talking to them about democracy, planting snowdrops for the Holocaust Memorial Day. We plant them in November, they flower in time for Holocaust Memorial Day. And it's the first time I've ever done it. Obviously I've done Remembrance Day frequently in Barnet, well, every year. But actually I've never been part of the AJEX, the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen, and they have a parade at the Cenotaph the week after Remembrance Sunday, and that was wonderful because that was a full band. What I was joking with the Deputy Mayor of Westminster when I saw her on Sunday at the Whittington Walk, which is a wonderful thing, been going for 40 or 50 years. All the mayors walk from the Whittington Hospital all the way down to the Mansion House, following the route that Dick Whittington took, and then have lunch at the Mansion House afterwards. So when I was talking to the Deputy Mayor, we were reminiscing that we're both about the same height. We're not tall. And when the band started to march, they went off at full marching pace, and we looked at each other and had to stretch our step a little to stay in step with them. And that was one of those moments I will not forget. It was a solemn occasion, but so often, as there are with solemn occasions, there are little smiles in there as well. So it's been a fascinating year. I've topped out buildings. I've got another one to do tomorrow. I have spoken at citizenship ceremonies certainly every couple of weeks during my time, and that's been a wonderful experience, hearing different people's stories about how they have come to take their citizenship. They can be people who've been working here, have found a relationship and a family, decided to stay. There are people who've come as refugees and have had a long journey and are now taking their citizenship after 7 or 8 or 10 years worth of time in this country. So it can be people with all sorts of different backgrounds, but they're all passionate about what they're doing. And we try in that ceremony to make sure it's not just a transaction but an occasion, and I think they rise to that occasion, and it is always very emotional. It's really quite a lovely thing. So a lot of different things, and then one I just wanted to put in because there are some quirky things you get to do. I've had 3 interesting musical interludes during the year. One you will be amused to hear was a concert of Hammond organ music, which was a bit niche, but that was wonderful. I got to go to the Return to London, which is an Irish festival celebration of music and dancing, and that was at the Crown in Cricklewood, where I'll be reopening part of the hotel on Saturday, and one that was a real indulgence. I got to go to the concert series that is in Hampstead Garden Suburb every early summer, and they asked me which ticket concert I'd like to go to, and I saw Darius Brubeck. Now, I grew up with my father loving the Dave Brubeck Quartet, and his son is now about my age and on the circuit actually, but it was wonderful. So you get to do some really interesting and odd things that you might not do otherwise. So it's been a really interesting and odd year with lots of different standouts for different reasons, some massively ceremonial, some very warm and personal. Quite a lot of organisations have volunteers who are older. It's one of those things you do when you've got a bit more time, when your children have gone and your job's not so onerous, or you've retired. And actually one of the things that many people find they can give is time and effort to a local organisation, and often bringing those lifetime skills to it. But of course, because the older members of the community were more isolated, inevitably during the COVID pandemic, because they were the most vulnerable, not all of them felt they could return confidently to giving. Some have, but not everybody has. And so organisations have lost some of the heart of their volunteering group. So it's not true of all, but it's certainly true of some. And it's made it more difficult, I think, for some of them to keep those contacts with their volunteers. Certainly fundraising has been a challenge, because many will have missed those annual events for 2 years when they raised funds. You know, they weren't able to have those face-to-face parties or events that they would normally raise lots of money. I help organise the East Finchley Community Festival. Lots of our charities have stalls there, and it's one of their fundraising opportunities. We missed one, had to scale down a second. We had a very small one in the second year of COVID, and we're back last year, but we had different organisations. So fundraising is difficult. Lots of organisations, business organisations, have had their challenges, and so those funds are less able to award grants or to give charitably. And I think it's also true to say that the cost of living crisis has had an impact on individuals' ability to donate to those charities. People are still incredibly generous though, and I think lots of us recognise the enormous value that our voluntary sector give. They really add value to our community, and they make the resources they have and the grants they have from the council go an awfully long way in terms of delivering. So yeah, that's been a challenge for many of them. And for some it's been about premises. It's been about the reach that they can have. Some have managed to do things online when they needed to. Some have had really big challenges. Homeless Action in Barnet is one of my charities, had to deal with a whole set of people who were on the street but were vulnerable to COVID, so they've worked really hard. So it's been a real mix, but it also has been a time, I think, when a lot of members of the public realised how valuable community organisations were. If they were in receipt of those food parcels, or somebody who came and picked up their prescription, or somebody who came and spoke to them on the phone. So I think maybe people understand the voluntary sector more, but it's been really challenging. Most of them are getting back on their feet, and we wouldn't manage without them, actually. They are very much part of our life. And Barnet has lots and lots of different small organisations who are hugely important. Gosh, so what have I actually achieved? Well, I've made some changes, which is, I was very clear that I wanted to be as open, accessible and inclusive. And that's not to say that previous mayors haven't been, but it was very much a mission for me about not being just being me, I suppose, but actually making the mayoralty meaningful in a modern setting for all of those communities. Because yes, people love the ceremony, but it's also about all the other things that you can bring and connect communities together and connect groups together. So a real drive around wanting to do that. And part of that was to do two things with the council meetings. The first was that other than the annual meetings, I haven't worn my robe in the council meeting. It's a business meeting. I chair that as mayor, but I'm the chair of council in that context. And so I wear my badge of office, but I wear a suit. And that's been very much about making sure that we changed the tenor of that meeting a little. The other part to changing that was we would normally have prayers at the beginning of the meeting. And I made a pledge at the beginning that I was going to have young people speak at the beginning about their aspirations for the borough and what they wanted us to think about when we were deliberating and having our debates in the council chamber. And that was sparked by an idea that came up a number of years earlier when we were talking about young people's voices. But it happened to coincide with the development of the My Say Matters programme within the council, which is a bringing together of the Youth Assembly, Youth Parliament and Youth Board. And it was helping the council have a group of young people who they supported to develop the skills to be the consultative body, to speak out for young people, to comment on policies and a range of other things. And some of the young people come from the group who have disabilities. Some will be looked after children. They're a whole mix of different young people. And they launched very early on in my mayoral year. And I was there for the launch, and they were so wonderful. They'd spent a lot of time during lockdown developing their skills online, but this was their big launch in person. And I felt they had something to say, so I asked them to be the inaugural speakers at the first meeting. And I've subsequently had young people of a range of backgrounds, and for international, well, the council meeting closest to International Women's Day, I had a group of young women as well, speaking at the beginning, talking about their aspirations, the things that they thought were important. Out of that first set of conversations and the My Say Matters group, they've been passionate about the environment, and some of those young people have gone on to be part of the Young Citizens Assembly, talking about our climate change plans, combating climate change plans. And so they've been meeting with the council in a very real way and having their voice really heard in developing those solutions to the climate crisis. And so it's been a really interesting year with those elements. Some of the other things that I've wanted to do is just really to get out there as much as I could. But it is very much about having a modern element to the mayoralty. So I developed a speech when I think I've done 4 or 5 dinners or lunches for different Rotary groups. It's very traditional, and so they asked for a full speech. And so my theme was very much, is there a place for the mayoralty in a modern council? And I'd say yes, absolutely. And it's about pitching that history and that dignity and that representation of the council, but doing it in such a way that it's meaningful for people right the way across. We are an immensely more diverse borough than we were. Well, we've been talking about the coronation and the Jubilee last year. 70 years ago in 1953, the borough looked completely different. And actually, it's much more diverse than it was when I was first a councillor. And so it's really important that it means something to all of those communities and that they come to understand the role it plays within our civic life and what that can mean for them, actually. So that was really important to connect with as many communities as possible. And we finally got the council to agree to them having a mayoral Twitter account. So we're small steps at the moment, but actually about projecting the mayoralty out onto that social media platform in a way that's constructive and doesn't get caught up in some of that nasty hurly-burly of social media, but actually is about putting a modern face on the mayoralty and talking about the things that you do. So there's more to come for that, and my successor will continue that, but it will be, I hope, an opportunity to continue to talk about the mayoralty.